Welcome to the webinar on the IHI Call 10 on rules and procedure for two-stage calls. My name is Nassima and I'm going to be your moderator today. Before we start, I just want to share some information with you. So if we can move to the next slide. So first, as usual, we are recording this session and it will be published on the IHI website just after this webinar, and we will also publish the presentation slides. The call has been launched this morning, and all the links and details of how to apply will be published on the Funding and Tenders portal and on the IHI website as well. Another information is that the final approved call text is already available on the link on the slide and also on the IHI website. And if you have any question, you are welcome to send them anytime via the Q&A function on the bottom right of your screen. Just send them in to us and we will get them at the end of the presentation. So today we have three colleagues online. So we have Alessandro, who is call coordinator, and he's going to kick off with the presentation. We also have Bolivios, who is our scientific operation coordinator, and we have Desmond, who is our legal officer. So now I will hand over to Alessandro.
Yeah, thank you very much, Nassima, for this. Okay, so going to the next slides. This is simply an outline of the different things that we are going to touch upon during this presentation. So we'll talk about some background rules for participation and for funding. So in order to participate to this call, some words, especially by my colleague Desmond, about intellectual property rights, and then a few information about what you're going to see if you would like to apply to a topic. So prepare a proposal for this first stage evaluation of call 10, the difference between consortium agreement and grant agreement, and the timeline. And then we finally conclude with some tip and tricks that is useful to remember from your side. So before digging into the specificity of what a two-stage evaluation call is in IHI, and especially the topics treated in this call 10, is always useful to remember that IHI is a private-public partnership between the European Commission, which is represented, the European Union represented by the European Commission, and the Europe health industry, so namely the pharmaceutical, medical, technology, biotechnology, digital health, and vaccine industries. The IHI industry partners are the trade associations, so COSIR, FPIA, which include also Vaccine Europe, Europa Bio, and MedTech. And then by leveraging the skill of a range of scientific fields from pharmaceutical to biotechnology to medical and data, we fund basically research and innovation projects that will address public health needs, especially unmet public health needs, and then in order to improve patient lives, and also to boost specifically the competitiveness of European health industry. So you have to keep in mind this as general concept, as general objectives of IHI before applying to a proposal. If you have participated in previous webinar for previous calls, this is quite different because we have two funding instruments in IHI. One is related to single call, and then the other one is two-stage. So the one that we are going to dig in more information today. So meaning that two-stage call, there will be two different stages where applicants needs to apply, and then here we specifically provide more and better information about the first stage, which is the one which is open now in the funding and tender portal. So on my side, we have, as I said, we have a public IHI is a private-public partnership, sorry, and in this case, this this link is also mentioned in the this stage of the call because there is a pre-identified industry consortium members which then they have aligned themselves around some real challenge in care, and then prepare the topic text that you will see on the funding and tender portal. And this topic text is online, but then is available to other applicants in order to develop from the information which is in there in the topic text, which is developed by IHI in the cooperation with industry partners to provide new ideas from other people, from other applicant consortium, which is composed by research organization, patient organization, SMEs, or other healthcare. And then it's important to remember that the scale, so the scalability of the projects, that the proposal that you're going to submit is the key to success, to provide to IHI in order to reach the overall objective of IHI. And then also you need to take into consideration that the outcome should be a transformative change for the healthcare in order to meet the end user needs. So more specifically, call 10, the first stage, is divided in three main topics. You will find all of them on the funding portal and on the IHI websites. And then one is about digital label. The second one is EHDS, so the European Health Data Space, and the PFAS. All the specificity related to the pre-identified industry consortium, the topic budgets, and so on, again, is available on the funding tender portal and the IHI websites under the call document page. So if you would like to apply for one of these proposal, your first source of information is the funding tender portal, where there is the scope, the expected impact, the expected outcome, and all the other specificity are there. In order to grasp a full set of information, there is also what we call a call document, which is an annex to the information that you're going to find on the funding portal and then again on the IHI website. And then we kindly ask to thoroughly have a look at this in order to fully understand what the topic is about, what are the industry members, in order to have some information, but better information that could help you in preparing the proposal. But then what is this two-stage evaluation process in details? So we are now at the call launch, because the call launch was done today, 16th of January. So meaning that what you see online, again, finding it on the IHI website, is the topic text, which has been developed and digested by IHI office in cooperation with the Pre-Identified Industry Consortium, and is approved by the governing board of IHI, because it is also included in our annual program from 2025. So now, if you focus on the first part of this picture, the stage one is a short proposal submission, and then we dig into the specificity, what the short means, meaning that there is an applicant consortium, which is composed, as we said before, by academics, hospital, regulatory agency, patient organization, SMEs, and profit entity with an annual turnover less than 500 million. These are the eligible participants that can apply. So meaning that the applicant at this stage, the pre-identified industry consortium has only led the topic text writing, so they are not coming to play, because this applicant consortium prepare a short proposal in order in checking what are the specificity of all the topics that you would like to apply. And then you need to take into consideration who are this pre-identified industry consortium, because at the end of the evaluation of stage one, only the first proposal, which is ranked first per topic, will be matched with the pre-identified industry consortium in order to prepare a full proposal. So, and then this is the reason why it's called two-stage, because there are two distinct stages for evaluation proposal. Now we are focusing on the first proposal. So applicant consortia, there are other than pre-identified industry consortium member, the winning one per topic. So as we said before, there are like 3 topics. So in stage 2, the full proposal, there will be 3 proposals to be developed. And then again, at the end of the second stage, the proposal will be ranked, and then it goes to the grant agreement signature, and the project can finally start. Here it's only some information about what are the specificity of the pre-identified consortium, and then what are the specificity on the not pre-identified consortium. So as we said before, is they are the main driver of the topic, because they are the one who had the original idea about this topic, and then was developed in collaboration with IHI office. Also, they've already identified their in-kind contribution. And then it's important to define that they are responsible for the 35%. You might know or remember, if you have attended previous webinar, this term of 45%, because in our single basic act establishing IHI, is mentioned that 45% of the cost needs to be bear by industry consortium member. And then this is what they need to have. But then this is for the pre-identified. You as a potential applicant, you need only take care of the preparation of your proposal. And then they are listed as a member in the topic text, and their contribution is there. They are not eligible for funding because they, as you said, they provide the in-kinds, and they cannot participate with the applicant consortium at this stage. Then not identified, so those who are preparing a bids, a proposal submission at this stage one are the one. So any other participant that can apply at stage one is not pre-identified. They are not involved in the topic description, so they need to take what is there in the topic description and then expand, take into consideration again what are the general objectives of IHI, what are the specific objectives of IHI, and the most important, what are the expected outcome and impact of the topic where you would like to prepare your application. And if successful, they could join the consortium afterwards, so in second stage, and do the grant agreement preparation. Their cost obviously is eligible for funding. Then most important, they do not need to contact the pre-identified industry consortium at this stage, because only the winning one from stage one will be matched in a sort of closed webinar with the industry consortium in order to prepare the full proposal. And then with this, I would like to conclude this first, let's say, introductory part, and then hand it over to my colleague Desmond for a few slides about eligibility.
Morning, everybody. So we're going to go through some aspects of eligibility now. Basically, just to familiarize everyone with essentially the first gate in terms of the applicant consortia. So we're going to talk about the legal entities which actually compose the applicant consortia. Then we're going to talk about making sure that the consortium itself is actually going to be eligible to participate in the action. And then we're going to talk about the two different facets of eligibility in terms of eligibility to take part or participate in an IHI project, and then whether someone is eligible to receive funding. So very, very quickly, if we go to the next slide and we talk about legal entities themselves, legal entities, as I said, these are either the the universities or the companies, or in some cases even the people individually who actually make up the applicant consortium, which then prepares the proposal. So this definition actually comes from the Horizon Europe regulation itself, and it applies to the entire Horizon Europe program, and therefore it applies to IHI. So when we talk about a legal entity, for the purposes of these slides and for the purposes of the program, we're talking about either a natural person or a legal person, which has been created under international or international law, and as such has legal personality. So for the lawyers in the room, we'll know that companies, for example, have legal personality much in the same way that a person has. So the key point is that because this definition is quite broad, most legal entities can take part in an IHI program without a problem, whether it's a company, whether it's a university, whether it's a person who set themselves up as a business. There's a great deal of flexibility there. And then that feeds directly down into the actual composition of the consortium itself. So normally in IHI projects, based on previous calls and even the previous programs, we would normally have 20, 30, 40, so frequently more legal entities actually making up an applicant consortium. And we got this question yesterday in a different webinar. There's no upward limit on the number of legal entities, at least not legally, but there are minimum requirements that we have to have for an actual consortium, an applicant consortium, to be eligible to basically submit a proposal and get into the competitive round. So as you can see at the bottom here, we basically say how to ensure that a consortium is eligible to participate in IHI actions. It's the rule of three. We need one independent legal entity which is established in an EU member state, and then we need at least two other independent legal entities, each established in a different EU member state or Horizon Europe associated country. Now, the states and the associated countries we're going to come to in a moment, just because we frequently get this question. When we talk about independent legal entities, what we mean there is that it would not be acceptable, for example, 3 subsidiaries of the same large corporate group, even if they're in different countries, to basically say we are actually forming a consortium and therefore we have 3 legal entities and this should be the minimum requirements, right? That's not how it works. So they need to be independent of each other, but we can have and have had in the past, 3 subsidiaries of the same company in the larger consortium, and that's fine. But this is a hard requirement. It's hard coded into legal basis, and this is something that every consortium should be aware of. Usually, in our experience, applicant consortia do not have difficulty making this meeting this requirement, but it's always very important that you bear in mind, do you have the right geographic makeup? Do you actually have one independent legal member state? Do you have an associated country? Do you have a different member state? Okay, so then let's talk about the different types of states, and we'll go to the next slide. So this is something that we've actually prepared and updated quite recently, just for the new calls we're actually releasing. So we've basically prepared a color-coded map here, which shows the different types of states as they're defined under the Horizon Europe regulation. So basically, we have a few colors here. Obviously, the blue is the main EU bloc, the member states themselves, and the overseas dependent and administered territories. So for example, as you can see, Greenland is obviously colored blue because that comes in under the EU, and more interestingly, French Guyana down in South America, which is administered by France, and then some of the islands as well in Oceania and the Caribbean are also covered as overseas dependent territories or extensions of member states, so they're fine. That's actually quite self-explanatory and easy. Then in green, because there's a lot, as you can see, primarily in the global south, but also in Eurasia, we also have what we call the low to middle income countries. There's a lot of them, and generally the rule here is that if you are coming from a low and middle income country, you're actually eligible to receive funding in an IHI program, and we'll talk about that in a minute. And then the ones that actually attract the most attention and the most questions for the legal team, and the ones that generally are most confusing for applicants, is the associated countries, and they are the ones in yellow. Now, what this basically means is an associated country is a country which has agreed with a formal association agreement, which is executed between the country and the EU bloc, that country is associating to either the whole Horizon Europe program or one of the pillars. For us, IHI, it's pillar 2, because the Horizon Europe program is made up of a number of pillars. So this map is very IHI centric. So the best example I can give you is Canada, for example. As you can see, it's colored yellow for us. Canada is associated to pillar 2. IHI is in pillar 2. Therefore, for us, Canada is an associated country. The most recent updates, just to bring everyone's attention to it, is if you look right in the middle of Europe now, you'll see that Switzerland is colored yellow. And also over on the right-hand side, you'll see South Korea is colored yellow. So from the 1st of January 2025, both Switzerland and South Korea are now associated to the Horizon Europe program, specifically in Pillar 2, or encompassing Pillar 2, which means that they're considered associated for IHI programs. Now, because the actual agreements have not been signed yet, IHI is going to use what's called transitional arrangements. So basically what that means is we are going to presume, with the best of intentions and the best assumption, that the agreement will be signed by the time we get to signing the actual IHI grant agreements. So if you are an entity coming from either Switzerland or South Korea, you should proceed on the basis that the agreement is going to be signed in the next few months. You should apply as a beneficiary, and you should consider yourself eligible for funding. Now, if we get to grant agreement signature, when we're signing the actual grant agreement with IHI, and those countries are not, they haven't actually finalized the actual agreement, and they're still not quite in the club, then we will have to make some changes. We'll basically change those entities into associated partners, but we'll deal with that at a different time. So as I said, we're proceeding on the basis that this is all going to be fine and the agreements are actually going to be signed. So Switzerland, South Korea, if you're an entity coming from there, you can apply as a beneficiary and you can expect to receive funding up to and until we get to the grant agreement signature stage, and then we'll look at the larger macro political situation. So as you, on the bottom left-hand side here, you'll see we've just put in another reminder here for the consortium eligibility, and it's color-coded as well to make it easier. One member state, one legal entity from one member state, that's blue, and then at least 2 other independent legal entities established in either a different member state or an associated country, the associated countries are yellow. And just because we got the questions recently, gray obviously is third countries who are not associated with Horizon Europe. They're not low middle income countries, and they're not part of the EU bloc. So they're the ones in gray. We'll talk about those a little bit in the next slide. But basically the ones that always get attention are India, Brazil, Australia. And Australia, the contrast there is Australia is not associated with Horizon Europe, whereas New Zealand decided it is. But this is fine. We'll talk about that in a second. All right, let's go to the next slide. So we said that there was a couple of facets of the actual eligibility for the legal entities that compose the consortia. So there's basically two. It's eligibility to participate in the actual consortia, and then there's eligibility to actually receive funding from IHI, which I was talking about a bit on the last slide. So eligibility to participate, I mean, we say it here, any legal entity, regardless of place of establishment, where it's coming from. And even if they're from non-associated third countries or international organizations, may participate. And what that basically means is, regardless of where you are coming from, with a couple of minor exceptions, which we'll talk about in an upcoming slide, you're very welcome to participate in an IHI project. So even if you're coming from those gray-coded countries on the map on the last slide, such as the US, such as India, such as Australia, you're extremely welcome to come to IHI projects, and this is very common and happens, and it's not problematic, and they always make a very valuable contribution, so that's fine. The difference here is whether entities are eligible to receive funding. So going back to what we were talking about in the previous slide, legal entities can receive funding from IHI if they are established in the member state. So obviously that's the EU bloc, or you're established in an associated country. They were the ones we had colored yellow. So for example, as we said, Canada or Switzerland or the UK now, or South Korea. Or they're established in a low to middle income country, which was the very large green areas. So as I said, a lot of countries in South America, a lot of countries in Africa, and also then in Eurasia as well. Basically, if you're coming from any of those countries, we would have a presumption that, with the bearing in mind the exception I'm going to come to, you should be able to receive funding from IHI if you're a member of the applicant consortium. As you can see on the next paragraph here, this is where we just start drawing a couple of clarifications. So we're saying this, as Alessandro said, this is a two-stage call, and the characteristic of the two-stage call is that in the topic text, we identify the pre-identified industry consortium. All the industry members who are in the pre-identified industry consortium are listed in the topic text. So we basically say that you were not eligible to receive funding if you were one of those legal entities, they're normally companies, in the pre-identified industry consortium that are listed in the topic text. This is clear. But also there's an additional requirement, which is legal entities with an annual turnover of 500 million or more are also not eligible to receive funding. So academics are fine, SMEs are fine, large companies are fine. It's just very large companies with very large annual turnover of 500 million or more, particularly, and that's throughout the wider corporate group. That's counted towards the 500 million. That's where you may not be eligible to receive funding. So we'll talk about this in a little bit. But if you have a question in relation to this, just reach out and contact the IHI legal team, or you can also refer to our guide for applicants, which has further information on this. But we'll talk about the guides and we'll talk about the legal team questions in a moment. Just 2 quick points down here at the bottom, because we put these in because we still get a lot of questions on it. So eligibility for funding is determined, as I said, by the type of call. So the rules are different between single stage and two-stage, but this is a two-stage call. So as I said, it's very clear which kind of entities do and don't actually get funding. Just to remind everyone, those entities in the pre-identified consortium don't get funding, and the very, very large entities don't get funding. Everyone else, the chances are good as long as you're coming from one of the associated European bloc or low middle income countries I talked about on the last slide with the map. And also, we're just reminding people that Canada from 2023 and the UK from 2024 are considered associated countries. So the chances are good you'll be eligible for funding under this call as well. Next slide. So as I said, for the third countries, they were the grey countries on the map. If they're non-associated third countries, they don't count towards the consortium composition, but also they're actually not eligible to receive funding primarily. The entities are not, if you're coming from those countries. So we just have a couple of examples here. Non-associated third countries, this slide has to be updated because Switzerland now is a associated country. So if you're coming from Switzerland, you will be able to receive funding. We'll have to update that slide. But the USA is still not associated, therefore you won't be able to receive funding if you're coming from the US. Now, one very powerful, quite flexible, but quite rare exception we have is that if you are coming from a third country and you are not normally eligible to receive funding, we do have what's called an exceptional funding mechanism based on essentiality to a project, which basically states that if you're coming from a third country, in exceptional circumstances, IHI could fund you if you're actually bringing something which is considered absolutely essential to the project. And we have an example here, particular expertise or data sets which are extreme importance to the actual program. What happens is that if we have an entity from a third country who's applying for exceptional funding, this has to be mentioned in the proposal, and then it is assessed by the independent experts that we get to evaluate the actual projects, and then the IHI program office will make the decision, taking into account the advice of the independent experts as to whether this entity that should not normally receive funding might actually receive funding from IHI. So it's a useful mechanism sometimes. It's not used very frequently. It's quite uncommon, but it is occasionally helpful. Next slide. So I mentioned 2 slides ago when I was talking about the eligibility to participate and saying that everyone's welcome to come, with a couple of exceptions. So the first one is obviously the Ukraine. Basically, the Ukraine itself is, they actually can participate. That's fine. They can actually receive funding, but the eastern parts of the Ukraine, because of the difficulties in that part of the world, if the legal entity is coming from the non-governmental territories of the Ukraine, primarily in the east, they're not eligible to participate in any capacity. Similarly, if someone is coming from the Russia or Belarus, they are not eligible to participate in an IHI action. If you have an entity from Ukraine and you want to know whether they're eligible to participate, take a look, see where they're actually established, which part of Ukraine they're actually from, and then, if you're still not sure, reach out to the IHI office and we can check it. And then in relation to Hungary, basically Hungary there, because of these difficulties, the current working practice we have is that publicly funded legal entities from Hungary, such as universities and such, are not actually able to receive funding. This is updated actually on the European Commission websites. If you have an entity from Hungary in your applicant consortium, I would recommend you check the updates and find the exact status we have. But as we have at the bottom, we basically say that Europe IHI funding cannot at the moment be used for purchase of goods, services, subcontracting, financial support, basically costs related to publicly controlled entities. So this is something that every applicant consortium needs to bear in mind. Next slide. Very briefly, we're going to talk about the IPR, which is the intellectual property. I think I've got 2 slides here just to keep everything very simple. So if we talk about intellectual property, because the work that we're doing in IHI, we're developing, we talk about a pre-competitive collaborative environment. It basically means that all the legal entities usually are bringing something quite valuable to the actual project. And obviously, if they're bringing or contributing significant assets to the project, they want to make sure that those assets are actually going to be protected. And, they want to make sure that anything that their trust is not actually going to be abused. So what we basically say is that while IHI, along with the rest of the Horizon Europe program, has very robust sharing mechanisms for our projects, we also have very robust protections for those legal entities that bring their assets to IHI projects. So you can, if you have something valuable that you want to introduce to a project, you can bring it with confidence, and you don't have to worry that someone's going to, take your basic asset and then commercialize it right out from under you. So this is quite a quick, very simple visualization of how it works. So on the left-hand side, we have what we call background identification. Now, quite simply, as defined underneath, background is essentially, it can be anything. It can be data, know-how, information. It can be something more tangible with the attached IP rights, which is held by the beneficiaries before they join the agreement and which is needed to implement the action or to exploit the results. So it's something that's needed for the project. Usually what happens is background is introduced into the project. It's used by the beneficiaries in the project to to do work and to generate results in the actual project. And if we look at the box on the right-hand side, you can see their background at the top, which is brown. We then use the background throughout the lifetime of the project. We then use the background to generate the results, and the results are any tangible or intangible effect of the action, such as data, know-how, information. Results can be something like a publication. It can be data sets. It can be something more tangible, which comes out of the actual project. It can be blood work. It can be a lot of things. the key point is that results are generated by the beneficiaries in the project. They are owned by the beneficiaries that generate them. So if you put background in, you retain ownership of the background. If you generate results in the project, you own the results you generate. Now, in relation to the background and in relation to the results that you generate, you do have to grant access rights to everyone else in the project so they can get their own work done, and limited, what we call limited exploitation rights, if they wanted to basically research the background of the results under certain circumstances. So, but again, the key point is the protections here are extremely robust. So if you're actually bringing something into the actual project in terms of background, or if you're going to be doing work in the project and generating results, have your legal team take a look at the intellectual property rights in the actual project. They're very well discussed in the annotated model grant agreement, which I'll talk about in a minute. If you still are not sure based on what you read in the annotated model grant agreement or our guidance that we have on the website, feel free to submit a question to the IHI legal team. We have 4 lawyers here. We've got myself, we have Carolina, we have Rafaela, and Katerina. And nothing pleases my colleagues more than knotty IP problem that they can get their teeth into and provide advice on. So please feel free to submit questions. And then so the access rights, as I said, they're going to be open to everybody, but you're going to drill into these in more detail in the consortium agreement that I'll talk about in a future slide. Let's go to the next IP slide. So this is the second and last IP slide, just for the moment. So as we said, just some bullet points to keep in mind for the IHI IP. This is primarily for the lawyers in the room. So the IHI intellectual property rules, they derive from a few different places. There's the high-level rules, which are laid out in Article 16 of the Model Grant Agreement. That's online. Then it's supplemented by specific rules identified in Annex 5 of the same agreement. And more importantly, if you basically have Annex 5, then within Annex 5, there's even more specific rules for the JU and for IHI. So basically, you're looking in 3 different areas of the same grant agreement because it's a corporate grant agreement for IHI. So your lawyers should basically make sure that they understand all the obligations which you're actually going to be signing up to, but also all the benefits. Because as I said, if you're in an IHI project, because it's collaborative, whatever someone else brings to the project as background, if you're going to use it, you'll get access rights to it if you need it. And then there's other potential access rights as well that you can exercise. A couple of quick things to note. If you generate something in an IHI project and you want to transfer that result, you are still the owner, but if you want to transfer that result or grant an exclusive license to a legal entity in a non-EU country, then strictly speaking, IHI has the right to object to that transfer. So how this basically works is if you anticipate transferring results from your project out of the EU to a legal entity in a third country, you should notify the office, and then we'll take a look at it and see if this is something that should concern the EU. It's not too common in IHI projects. Normally this kind of thing relates more to security, cyber, green tech. But you do have an obligation to let us know, and then we'll either say we have a problem or we don't. So far, we haven't had a problem with any transfers or exclusive licenses, but it's an obligation nonetheless. This is something some of the very large companies that take part in IHI projects, sometimes they're concerned about because, for example, the US part of the conglomerate handles all global access or global licensing. So they transfer all results to the US and then they apply for global protections. So this is something we're quite used to, and it's not a problem. As I said, if this is something you anticipate doing, let the IHI office know well in advance, and then we can discuss it, and if necessary, we can discuss a waiver. Affordable access provisions is something very specific to the joint undertakings, some of the joint undertakings, and to IHI. What this basically means is that if for the project that's actually being done, if we can anticipate that a product or service is going to come out of the project that's actually being done, and it involved clinical trials to start with, or clinical studies, then, and we're concerned about the downstream effects of that product or service, then affordable access provisions kick in, which basically affects how that product or service should be developed with an aim towards ensuring that that product or service is affordable, available, and accessible after the end of the project. So what I would recommend is if you are applying to an IHI topic, and we say this each and every time, take a look at the special conditions of that topic and see whether 3A applies. It will be identified in the topic text. If it is, then this is something that needs to be discussed by the consortium, and you need to have a discussion at the proposal stage. You need to think about the proposal stage. It needs to be talked about and dealt with during the lifetime of the actual project, and then there are obligations for a few years after the project as well. So this is something that we flag, and because it is actually quite important. The results ownership list is not IHI specific, and it happens for every Horizon Europe project, but it's a development for Horizon Europe and IHI, and we think it's actually very good. What this basically means is that at the end of the project, all of the results which have been generated and the entity that generated them and therefore owns those results is identified in the final periodic report. And that's very, very useful, because then it gives a great overview of everything that's being generated in the project, who owns it, joint ownership structures as well, if it's a jointly generated result. And then that feeds into the last point, which basically then makes it easier to make sure that those results are disseminated, open science is utilized. And this is very rare for IHI projects, but potentially, if a result is generated in a project and the owner doesn't have an interest in exploiting it, we can then match those results with interested parties via the Horizon Results platform. We haven't read just at the bottom, and again, I'll talk about this in a future slide. I said the high-level results or the high-level rules in relation to the background of the results are in the grant agreement and in Annex 5. In the consortium agreement, which is the agreement between just the participants, IHI doesn't sign the consortium agreement. This is where you really get down to the mechanics of how the access rights and how IPR is actually going to work. They're already laid out in some of the templates we'll talk about in a bit. But the idea is that your day-to-day intellectual property mechanisms are laid out in the consortium agreement. Okay, I think that's my last IP slide. Next one. I think Alessandro, I think you're up, are you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm back on stage. So thank you very much. So we are moving to the next section of this presentation, which is about proposal template and evaluation criteria. So we would like to provide you with a sort of some basic information, some glimpse of what are the things that you need to put in your proposal, what is the behavior of the funding attendant portal that you need to take into consideration in order to prepare and submit your proposal. And then from there, what are the criteria that you are going to use in order to evaluate your proposal, and then inform the applicants about the successful or not successful outcome of the evaluation. So, as I said, the stop shop that you need to take into consideration to prepare the proposal is the funding attendant portal. So in there you have a lot of information, a lot of guidance that you can have a look, you can digest. I mean, it's the sooner that you start going to the funding attendant portal, better it is, because it helps you to understand how the system works. So the product templates, now we know more information about it, is divided in let's say 3 different parts: the part A, the part B, and the annexes. So the part A is a form, and then you see on the right side of the screen, this is a test that I did on the funding attendant portal in order to test the behavior, to see if what I was seeing on my screen will be the same as you're going to see on your part. So the part A, it's is not a template per se, because it's a dynamic form that you're going to fill it in, and then it contains all the basic information, let's say administrative information related to your proposal, and then it's divided in 3 main parts. So the general information, where you have the duration, the keywords, the acronym, the full name of the proposal, the abstract, so on and so forth. And then you have the participants. So you need to list all the participants that are going to take part in this proposal. So the ones that are not pre-identified, just to make a link with what has been said before. And then the budget. The budget, since we are talking about first stage of 2-stage evaluation, it's basically a number. So it's the total number. And then this is linked also, and then please have a look at the call document in the topic that you would like to submit your application, because the total, say, JU contribution is mentioned there. So once you have prepared the part A, there is the part B of the proposal. The part B of the proposal, it's a narrative part, you will see in the system that there is on the left side of the funding tender portal, once you enter, you would like to submit your application, there is a template package where all the Part B and the other annexes are present. So you're kindly asked to go there, download the template, fill it in, and then re-upload it again. For your convenience, all the information that is in the portal are also available on the IHI website. So if it's difficult for you to navigate through the portal, we narrow down the information in the IHI website as well. So the Part B, as said, is basically the description of your proposal is divided in three main sections: excellence, impact, and implementation. And then this will be the same criteria that will be used by external experts to assess your proposal. But then we are coming to this in a minute. The length of this Part B is maximum 20 pages. So if you're trying to upload a document which is more than 20 pages, all the pages from the 21st page onwards will be watermarked with excess page, and then it's basically blank. So experts are not able to see what is in there. So it's always better if you limit your information to the 20 pages. And then again, please respect the page limit in the application form, and so on and so forth, as we said before. I said before that you have Part A, Part B, and annexes. Since we are talking about first stage evaluation, the only annex that is mandatory is the type of participants. So all those participants that you are putting in the Part A, in the administrative form, needs to be listed in the type of participant. This is, along with the Part B, the two templates that you are going to find in the funding and tender portal. This is something that will be not assessed per se by the evaluator, but then is important also for us for statistical purposes and then for our KPI, in order for you to fill it in correctly as possible. Also because the type of participant that will be there, if your proposal is successful, will be transferred in the full, let's say, proposal package, where you need to reiterate the information and then put aside the information of the budget related to each participant that you're going to use in the full proposal. But then for the time being, for the first stage, it's enough if you put the type of participant, and then in there it's an Excel file, and then we have guidance in there how to fill it in. It's pretty straightforward, but then if you encounter any issues, you can contact the IHI office or have a look first at the guidance which is there. So finally, for the proposal part, there are like 3 highlights. So there's something which is applicable to the first stage, is something that will be applicable only to second stage onwards. So the intended contribution for each topic is mentioned in the fundamental portal and in the call text that you need to have a look very thoroughly in order to prepare your application. Then you will see it in the portal. We also mentioned something about the plan for dissemination, protection, and communication activities and the clinical studies, because the portal will be open even for first stage and second stage. So the same submission system will be used for both, but these are applicable only in second stage. So you don't need to take care of this right now. Coming to the second part of this section, this is the evaluation workflow. So we said all the information is the portal and in the IHI website. You prepare application based, take into consideration the topic that you would like to prepare and submit your proposal with. Once the deadline of the submission phase is over, we do a first line of check, which is the admissibility eligibility check. And then with this, we make reference to the eligibility criteria that Desmond talked about the minimum consortium requirement. And we run the evaluation through the individual evaluation, the consensus group, using a group of experts. And then at the end, once this evaluation is over, we prepare a package with the outcome letters that goes to all applicants who have submitted the proposal for which the proposal was deemed admissible and eligible. In order to do so, we use at least 3 independent experts to assess each individual proposal, but then due to the complexity of IHI codes and projects and proposal, normally we use between 5 and 6 experts per proposal. Please remember that your proposal will be evaluated as it is submitted. There is no way to change your proposal description once the submission it's over. And in the evaluation form, in the proposal template, also evaluation form, I talk about that there are like excellence, impact, implementation. These are the 3 main criteria, but also there are other sub-criteria under each of these main criteria which are listed. So please carefully look at those in order to better prepare your application. And then finally, this is the score that you're going to receive, apart from the, say, description from the comments about the quality of your proposal. There is a range of number that we can use in order to discriminate if a proposal is passing to the second stage or not. And then there is each each number for each of the criterion is scored between 0 and 5, and then the threshold for each is 3 in order to pass, but then the total is 10 over 15. And then here it's, I would like to conclude this part with some, say, evaluation tips. You will see that, as we said before, there are three main sections that's in the template that you need to use for your proposal preparation. So excellence, impact, implementation. All this has a direct link with the expected outcome, with the scope, and the expected impact that your proposal should have, which are listed in the topic text, which is, again, available on the Funding Tender portal and on our IHI website. So what you need to do, your job, which is, I know, can recognize is pretty difficult, you need to link what you're going to submit with the aim that is and expected outcome and impact, which are listed in the topic text. So for example, if you talk about excellence, there are different, several objectives that are listed in the call text per topic. And then you should be able to address through your proposal, and then this is the difficulty because you need to convince us and the expert that in 20 pages you can reach all the objectives which are listed, not pick some of those. It's better if you, through your proposal, you can address all the objectives that are there. Also, there is a methodological part that needs to be clearly identified. And then this part is not about the consortium who is going to take care of what. It's about the robustness of the methodology that you're going to put in your proposal. Then going to the impact, again, there will be a series of expected impact, and then please try to make reference how your proposal will reach most, all, or some of the expected impact that are listed in the topic description. And then also try to make some measurement. We are going to fully or reach this expected impact, and this is the way that we're going to measure, okay? And this is also a useful tips also for the expert, the external expert going to assess the proposal in order to see if this is going to be realistic or not. And then the last part is the implementation, as everything related to the consortium. So since this is the first stage of proposal and the information is brief because it needs to be contained in 20 pages, try to be as clear as possible. Do not list the deliverable, but then focus on the overall structure of the proposal. So your work packages, and then the link of the overall packages, again, with the overall objective of the proposal, we should be linked to the overall objectives of the topic. Okay, and then again, there are other things that need to be taken into consideration because you have a consortium. Each member of the consortium should have a valid role in order to reach their targets, in order to reach milestone and deliverables. But then there should be an overall coherence of all members of the consortium in order to reach the overall objectives, okay, of your proposal. And then going to the next parts, there is slides with the difference between, sorry, grant agreement, consortium agreement, and then I handed over the microphone to Desmond.
Thanks, Alessandro. Okay, so one quick slide here, just on the back of what we just talked about. So I've mentioned this in a couple of previous slides. The issue here is that if you are applying for an IHI project, then you need to bear in mind after you get through the proposal stage and if your proposal is funded, there's going to be two agreements which you're going to be signing, and this ties into everything we've been talking about up to this point. So there, as I said, there is the grant agreement, which is the Horizon Europe Model Grant Agreement, which applies to the entire Horizon Europe program, and that's available online. And there is an annotated version of that, which we recommend everyone take a look at. And if you're contemplating joining an IHI project, your legal representatives, whether you're a very large company or whether you're a university, should take a look at the annotated grant agreement. I said a few slides ago, particularly in relation to the intellectual property, to make sure exactly what your rights and obligations that you're going to be subject to when you sign the agreement is understood. So as we said there, the GA, it follows the standard rules. It's e-signed by IHI JU, our executive director, and then the coordinator signs it as well for their role. And then all the other beneficiaries, they don't sign the grant agreement itself. They basically sign what's called an accession form within 30 days. As I said, that's the high level. The conditions of the grant agreement don't really change. And then beside the grant agreement, so if you think there's two agreements that you're signing in parallel, the second one is the consortium agreement. Now, as I said a few slides ago, the consortium agreement it kind of runs the project on a day-to-day basis, and it's executed and agreed between the beneficiaries. So IHI, we're not a signatory to the consortium agreement, but the key point is that there cannot be anything in the consortium agreement which conflicts or contradicts the actual grant agreement. Now, as we say here, a couple of templates have actually been developed for Horizon Europe consortium agreements. I think there's 3 or 4 out there. The two that we normally draw attention to are, there has been one which has been prepared by the private members of IHI. So basically that's the industry legal teams, which was prepared specifically for running IHI projects, and that's available on the private members' websites, and there's a link to that on the IHI JU page itself. And then there's also just an example of the other consortium agreement templates that are available. There's DESCA as well, which is a simplified template which has been prepared by a working group. So there's a lot of resources out there. When you were looking at these agreements and you get to that stage, as I said, you should refer to the annotated model grant agreement, or your legal team should. I think everyone should actually read the IHI guide for applicants as well, where we talk about a lot of the things that Alessandro has been discussing throughout this actual slide deck in terms of eligibility and in terms of what's required to do the proposal, in terms of the expectations that are there, in terms of how the various types of participant work in an actual project and how it's planned they work in the proposal. And then if you have a question and you actually don't find the answer in the annotated model grant agreement or in the IHI guide for applicants or all the other supporting materials that we actually have there, including the contributing partner guide that Carolina, one of our lawyers here, has prepared, then you can actually submit a question to the applicant mailbox. Nassima will give a reference later on, and then the legal team, we actually contribute towards the answers for that, the mailbox. So you'll get the answer one way or another. We're confident we'll be able to address any queries that we actually receive. So that's the two agreements. Bear in mind, as I said, they're parallel. You're going to be signing both of them. It's just a question of whether it's at the high level of the actual grant agreement itself or whether it's the more day-to-day operations, which is enshrined in the consortium agreement. Next slide.
Okay, and then this is back to me. So this is the final part of the presentation, and I would like to go very quick in the interest of time. So far we have told you a lot of information about what you need to put in your application. And then in the next slide, we are going to tell you when you need to do it. So as announced already at the beginning of the presentation, so the launch of the call is today, 16th of January. And so this is a structure of the timeline. You remember this is a 2-stage evaluation. So there will be proposal submission, a deadline, evaluation, and then the second stage, and then the flow is repeated. So the deadline for the first stage evaluation is 23rd of April. And then please keep in mind that each deadline for any call under Horizon is at 5 o'clock of the given date. So it will be 5 o'clock p.m. on the 23rd. And then we run the evaluation between May and June. And then by the end of June, we should be able to inform the applicants. And then the successful one will have to match with the pre-identified industry consortium. And by the 14th of October, prepare full proposal. And then again, the cycle is October, November, we do the evaluation. And then the info to applicants will be done in December 2025. And then hopefully the grant agreement will be signed no later than March 2026. So a few points that I would like to, there are only two slides related to this. So I would like to recap some important points that you need to remember, and that this is all the information that it was scattered along the presentation. So the type of action is research innovation action. So your proposal should have a research, a innovation components. Again, the 3 independent legal entities in a different member states. Is important, is relevant for you. Also, please remember that at least one legal entity should be established in a member state. The limit of the page is 20. And you are not allowed to contact the industry consortium at this point in time, because only for those who will be successful, we will make a matching event in order to kick off the preparation of the full proposal. And then finally, again, some point to remember is, as I said, the primary source of information for you is the funding and tender portal, especially the part related to the topic description, the annexes, and the documents, which you need to use and take into consideration. Also, check again those two. If you have too much information and are able to find what you would like to look for in the funding and tender portal, there is also another source of information, which is the IHI websites. And everything should be there in order to allow to better allow the external expert to assess your proposal and provide you with a meaningful summary. Also use the template, which is either on the portal or on our websites. And then again, the coordinator must be financially viable, but also this is something more applicable to second stage. And do not contact Deep Indie Training Consortium. If you have any other question, you need to contact us. And then finally, there is one slide. So here we summarize most of the information, links to documents that you are going to use, especially the strategic research agenda and other which are mainly related to the Horizon Europe Framework Program. And then again, if you have any query, please contact us through the applicant and mailbox or through the state representative group, the SSRG, and you find the name in the IHI websites. And then last thing, as we said before, we use external expert in order to assess the proposal. And then one of our tasks is to renew every time that we run an evaluation. We need to have new expert and brand new expert, which can never work or for IHI or with IHI or in Horizon Framework Program. So again, in the funding tender portal, there is a section called Work as an Expert. And then if yourself or you know someone that would like to take part in this journey of evaluating proposal for IHI, please register and tell us the ECAS ID, which is the format of EX 2025, for example, for this year, if you're going to register this year. And then you need to, through the applicant mailbox, you can send us your ID, and then we will put you in our database, internal database of experts, that and then you might be used for upcoming evaluation. And then this is the final slide for me, and then I hand it over to Nassima.
Thank you very much, Alessandro and Desmond, for this clear and detailed presentation. So before we move to the question and answers, I would like to remind you that all the webinars which were held for the IHI Call Days for Call 9 and 10 are online, and we will be publishing this one this afternoon. So you have the presentation slide and all the recordings on the IHI website, sorry. And I would also like to promote one webinar that we will have at the end of this month on contributing partners. So if you want to know everything about the IHI contributing partners, I would invite you to register for this event if it's not done yet. So now we can move on to the Q&A. So I will invite Bolivius to join us. So the first question is someone asking a question for call 9 and 10. Can one applicant be a coordinator of two consortium applying for funding in different topics?
I can take over this question.
Yes, sure.
Of course, there is no rule prohibiting applicants to be part on several proposals, either from call 9 or call 10, or from one topic to another. What is important, though, is when the proposals that this applicant is participating will be selected for funding, these participants should have the operational and the financial capacity to run what is promised in terms of task within each of the consortium. So it's really important to assess each organization, its applicant internally, how many resources they have in order to participate in the proposals, and take it seriously that if these proposals are selected for funding, they can keep up to their promise. At the same time, of course, for the private for-profit entities like SMEs or let's say associations that also for profit, There, they have to think seriously in terms of their operational capacity, if they are small, on how they can really perform the task in several projects that might not be only for IHI, but also in other Horizon Europe program or in other programs that are funded by the European Union.
Thank you, Bolivius. The next one is, what about substantial operational subsidiaries, not just sales office, for example, US or Japanese companies in Europe?
No, I think I said this in one of my first slides. The key point here is that we're funding independent legal entities. So if you are a subsidiary of an extremely large US company, as I said, you count the turnover of the overall group. So if your overall group turnover is going to be 500 million or more annually, then it doesn't matter if you're a European entity of the larger group, because you're not considered independent, and the overall figure is counted and you won't be eligible. So the key point is, as I said, it's kind of a two-stage thing. Am I independent? If I'm not independent, then what's the larger overall turnover? If we have had some edge cases before that the legal team had to do some analysis on. So please feel free, if you're not sure, just submit a question and we can take a look at it in detail. We'll obviously require some of your figures, but it's sometimes there are interesting edge cases that we can take a look at.
Thank you, Desmond. The next one is it possible for a European company not member of an industry partner association of IHI and with an annual turnover of more than 500 millions to participate in a consortium with in-kind contribution?
So we're talking about the two-stage call today, and as we said, Alessandra went into a bit of detail on this. We have in the two-stage call model, it's the pre-identified industry consortium that are responsible for contributing the in-kind and the financial considerations towards or contributions towards this 45% threshold. So they are already laid out in the topic text. Now, it is theoretically possible that if we have a large company that's not an industry partner, that's not part of one of the four members of IHI, they could conceivably join as a contributing partner and contribute in kind that way. It wouldn't be possible at this stage. We'd probably be looking at having them join at a later stage, maybe after the project actually starts, when we definitely have a winning entry. And when we know who's actually being funded. But then what would happen is they'd have to apply to become a contributing partner, and more importantly, then there'd have to be discussions with the consortium as well. So I'm not going to rule it out, but I would say two things. One, it's absolutely, if you're thinking about this, it's absolutely essential you look at Carolina's webinar on the 30th, that you look at the guide that we've just updated for CPs. It's on the IHI website as well, because there are some nuances here that will have to be considered. And then if you're still not sure, then submit a question and we'll happily deal with it.
Nassima, maybe for this one to complement with a key final message. Here, the in-kind contributions, in order to be eligible at the same time and count for the program, there are only two ways, like Desmond said. Either you're a member or you're a contributing partner. If you're a normal company that wants to join or wants to put their in-kind, thank you very much. But at the end, these will not be counted against the program commitment. This is the first key message. The second, like Desmond said, is again to be a contributing partner, but it's very important for the applicants to understand becoming a contributing partner is not an automatic and procedural aspect. It needs to fulfill the criteria. It has to be assessed and approved by the governing board. It's not really a straightforward and direct answer. It's not having, the applicants will not have this, the contributing partner status automatically. So, like we said, it's important to understand the criteria and join also the webinar on the 30th of January.
Thank you, Bolivius and Desmond. So the next one is, how can Indian companies having annual turnover less than 500 million become eligible for funding?
No, if we cast our minds back to the map, and I think I selected it as an example as well. India at the moment, they have chosen not to join the Horizon Europe program. So they are not classified as an associated country like Canada or Switzerland or South Korea. They're obviously not part of the EU bloc, and they're not classified as a low and middle income country either, which you'll remember are the green colored entities. So they're actually classified as a third country, like the US or Australia. Now, what that basically means is by default, legal entities that are established in India, regardless of their size or their annual turnover, are not eligible to receive funding from IHI. Now, you'll remember shortly after we showed the map, I said that there is a possibility in extremely limited circumstances, decided on a case-by-case basis with the advice of the independent experts as part of the evaluation process, that we could consider extending exceptional funding to an entity from a third country that's considered absolutely essential for the action, but it's quite rare, and it would have to be explained very well in the actual proposal as to why these guys were so essential and why IHI should consider funding them, even though they're coming from an entity that's really not connected with the Horizon Europe program. But it is possible. So what I would say is, by default, as I said, if you're from India, you're not receiving funding from IHI unless there's something really exceptional about what you're doing in the actual project. And we would refer you to the guide for applicants, which is on the IHI website, which you'll find very useful. And there's a bit of detail on this.
Thank you, Desmond. And now we'll move on to the last question. Can the salary of the coordinator be requested for funding?
Well, I mean, well, theoretically, yes. I think there's a bit of detail here, which we don't really have the time for. But what I would say is, two things. One, there's actually, this is dealt with in one of the financial webinars that is on the website, and it's explained in the financial guide. But the key point is that what's remunerated for a legal entity in an IHI project is what we call eligible costs. So if it is a cost, the salary, then it would be remunerated if the coordinator is an entity which is receiving funding from IHI. So, I mean, if you think about the coordinator salary in terms of an FTE or something similar, then yes, it is conceivable that the salary could be remunerated. But I have to really reiterate what Polivia said. If we're going to have someone who's coordinating an IHI project, our key concern is that entity actually, do they have the capacity to coordinate the project? Do they actually have the facilities? Because it's no small thing to actually coordinate an IHI project. You'll recall that I said that whereas the minimum number of legal entities is 3, it's not uncommon for an IHI project to have dozens of legal entities that need to be coordinated. And you know, administratively, it is a task. So the short answer is yes. The longer answer is yes, but we need to make sure that the coordinator is actually has the capacity to do it. But then if the coordinator is the right kind of coordinator and that they count as eligible costs under the quite strict rules of the grant agreement, which again, everyone should be familiar with, then I think it's possible.
Thank you, Desmond. So now we are going to close this webinar. So I would like to thank you, Alessandro, Bolivius, and Desmond for your participation. Thank you to all of you for your interest, and I wish you good luck with your proposal. Thank you very much. Have a nice day. Bye-bye.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.